3 hours. That is how long it took for Iran to fundamentally break the logic that Israel's entire air defense architecture was built on, not with a single catastrophic weapon, not with a technology nobody had seen before, but with something far more devastating. A solution so simple, so mathematically brutal, that every defense engineer who watched it unfold knew immediately that the system they spent decades perfecting had just become obsolete. Iran fired cluster missiles. And if you do not understand what that means yet, you need to. Because it does not just change this war. It breaks the entire equation modern missile defense depends on. Here is the science. And stay with me because this is where it gets genuinely frightening. A normal missile defense system works like this. Radar detects an incoming missile, tracks its path, calculates the trajectory, fires an interceptor to destroy it. One threat, one response. The system was engineered for that equation. Billions of dollars spent perfecting it. Decades of testing to get the intercept rate high enough that governments could tell their citizens, you are protected. Iran just broke that equation in half. A cluster missile launches as a single projectile. Radar detects it. One target. Defense system calculates the intercept. Interceptor fires. And then, at a specific altitude, at the precise moment the defense system is committed, the missile opens. And from that single casing, hundreds of individual warheads release simultaneously, spreading across a wide area and continuing toward the ground. By the time the defense system realizes what is happening, the intercept window is gone. The one interceptor that fired hits the empty casing. The hundreds of submunitions are already falling, and to stop them now, you would need hundreds of interceptors launched in the same second, which no system on Earth is designed to do. What you are seeing in the videos right now, the ones that look like fireworks exploding across the Israeli sky, those bright trails spreading outward like an umbrella, that is not one missile being hit. That is one missile becoming hundreds. That is the moment the defense system realizes it has already lost. Iran has essentially invented a way to make a single missile function like an entire missile barrage, and the world watched it work in real time over 3 consecutive hours. But here is what makes this even more devastating. And this is the piece that the military briefings are trying to keep quiet. The cluster munition problem does not just overwhelm interceptors. It overwhelms the entire defense budget calculation. America's most advanced interceptor missiles cost between $3 million and $9 million each. A single cluster missile from Iran's arsenal costs a fraction of that. To reliably defend against one cluster launch, trying to take out submunitions individually, you would need to fire dozens of interceptors in the same moment. That is $100 million to $300 million in defense spending to stop a single incoming cluster strike. Iran can launch dozens of these in a night, and remember the production math that nobody in Washington wants to discuss openly. U.S. officials have stated that Iran's missile production capacity runs at approximately 100 units per month. The United States can manufacture approximately 6 to 7 interceptors per month. Read that comparison again. 100 missiles per month against 6 or 7 interceptors per month. That is not a ratio either side can sustain. During the 12-day war in June, the United States burned through roughly a quarter of its entire THAAD interceptor inventory. A quarter of the national supply gone in 12 days. Each Iranian ballistic missile costs somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 to manufacture. Each Arrow, or David's Sling interceptor used to shoot one down, costs between $1 million and $3 million. Israel is spending 5 to 10 times more per engagement than Iran is. That arithmetic does not improve with time. It gets worse. And the operational reality on the ground confirms this is not theoretical anymore. It is happening right now. The IDF confirmed something that reframes this entire conflict. Approximately 50% of all ballistic missiles launched by Iran at Israel since February 28th carried cluster bomb warheads, not conventional unitary warheads, cluster munitions, weapons that do not detonate as a single explosion. Instead, they released dozens of smaller submunitions, each packed with several kilograms of explosives, scattering across a radius of up to 10 kilometers. The IDF stated Iran has been firing cluster-armed missiles at Israel almost daily since the war started. Most people assume interception means the threat is neutralized. In reality, cluster munitions break that logic entirely. Israel's Arrow system, David's Sling, the Iron Dome, they are all engineered to track and destroy a single re-entry vehicle on a calculable arc. A cluster warhead is designed to fragment. If the interceptor reaches the missile before it disperses, the threat is contained. But if the warhead separates at altitude, which is what these weapons are designed to do, the submunitions scatter across kilometers before any interceptor can engage them individually. One missile becomes dozens of independent projectiles. And there is a second problem that rarely gets discussed. Even when a cluster-armed missile is intercepted, the force of the interception can still rupture the casing and spread the bomblets outward. The defense system operates on binary math, hit or miss. Cluster ordnance operates on distribution. One warhead, 20 to 24 bomblets, and a 5-meter radius of dispersal. The evidence on the ground confirms this. In Yehud, just outside Tel Aviv, 2 construction workers were killed and a third critically wounded by submunitions from a single cluster-armed missile. They were outdoors. They never reached a shelter. First responders near Beit Shemesh described arriving at multiple overlapping blast scenes only meters apart, treating casualties simultaneously across a scattered impact zone. More than 100 countries have signed the Convention on Cluster Munitions, banning these weapons because of their indiscriminate nature and the unexploded ordnance they leave behind for years. Iran is not a signatory. Neither is Israel. Neither is the United States. The interception problem is only one dimension. The second is what Iran has been doing to the systems that are supposed to make interception possible in the first place. The New York Times published an analysis based on commercial satellite imagery, verified video footage, and official statements. That analysis identified at least 17 American military and other facilities damaged by Iranian strikes across the Gulf region. 11 of those are U.S. military installations. The sites include Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Ali Al Salam Air Base, and Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, and the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Several were struck more than once. Satellite images show damage to radomes, satellite dishes, and structures adjacent to THAAD TPY-2 radar systems, the tracking radars that coordinate ballistic missile interception across the entire region. Near Al Dhafra in the United Arab Emirates, satellite imagery captured structural damage immediately adjacent to where an AN-TPY-2 system was positioned. If damage affected radar support or communications, it could have reduced detection and coordination, but the full operational effect has not been publicly confirmed. Senior U.S. defense officials told the Times that Iran adapted its targeting strategy since the start of the conflict to focus specifically on American vulnerabilities, the interceptors and air defense systems, meant to protect U.S. forces and assets. The Times reported that Iran's ability to damage these facilities, and this is the critical phrase, defied expectations in the Trump administration. That is not neutral language. Defied expectations means the planning assumptions were wrong. It means the pre-war intelligence assessment underestimated what Iran could reach and what it could damage. The Pentagon itself admitted it does not have a complete picture of all Iranian launchers still operational. Damage to the 5th Fleet headquarters alone was estimated at roughly $200 million. At Ali Salem, at least 6 structures tied to satellite communications, infrastructure were destroyed or damaged. Now connect the sequence. Iran neutralized or degraded early warning radars in previous waves. Then it struck the Hatzor satellite communications relay south of Tel Aviv twice. Then it hit THAAD, tracking radars and communications infrastructure across the Gulf. The pattern is systematic. Radars first, communications second. Then the heavy warheads arrive into a detection environment that can no longer see them coming or coordinate the response. The Khorramshahr reaches Mach 16 outside the atmosphere and Mach 8 during re-entry. If the tracking radar feeding your interceptor battery is offline, speed becomes academic. You're not shooting at what you cannot acquire. The blackout referenced in this analysis is not a metaphor. It is happening on both sides of this war simultaneously. In Israel, the IDF Home Front Command has maintained nationwide emergency restrictions with no announced expiration. Schools remain closed, public gatherings are capped at 50 people, workplaces can only operate where bomb shelters are accessible within the required warning window. Power disruptions have followed Iranian strikes in central Israel. Damaged infrastructure, scattered debris fields from cluster munitions, and continuous shelter directives have functionally paralyzed civilian life across the country's commercial center. In Iran, the blackout is digital. Coordinated American and Israeli cyber attacks collapsed Iran's internet connectivity to between 1% and 4% of normal capacity within the first 60 hours of the conflict. Iranian authorities then extended the outage themselves, blocking global internet access for a 6th consecutive day, while restricting information flow to state-controlled domestic channels. One Iranian journalist documented spending 6 hours testing 59 different VPN configurations before successfully transmitting a single post. The information vacuum inside Iran is nearly total. What we are seeing now is the systematic dismantling of the architecture that has governed the Middle East for 40 years. Not in a chaotic, uncontrolled collapse, but deliberately, methodically, layer by layer, at a pace that keeps the world slightly off balance and unable to mount a coherent response. Military layer gone. America's missile defense credibility has been shattered publicly. The THAAD radar is destroyed. Cluster missiles have exposed the fundamental vulnerability in the defense intercept model. Interceptor stockpiles are depleting faster than they can be replaced. 25% of early warning capacity in the region is offline. What does America actually do from here? The options are genuinely constrained in ways they have not been in any previous American military engagement. Escalating conventionally means more of what is not working. More expensive interceptors chasing cheap drones, more bases getting hit, more Gulf relationships fracturing. The math gets worse every day, not better. Escalating to regime change in Iran requires ground forces in a country of 90 million people with deep military preparation, complex terrain, and decades of experience designing exactly the kind of asymmetric resistance that destroyed American campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. De-escalating and withdrawing means accepting the deal Iran offered from day one. American bases leave, strikes stop. This is politically humiliating, but it is the only option on the table that ends the military and financial bleeding. History is watching which choice gets made. And history already knows how countries choose when their leaders make the political cost of withdrawal feel larger than the human and economic cost of continuation. They continue until continuation becomes impossible. 3 hours, hundreds of cluster submunitions rain down from single missiles over Israel. Defense analysts are recalculating every assumption about missile defense economics. Somewhere in Tehran, planners are reviewing the next phase. In Washington, in the buildings where the decisions that caused all of this were made, the people responsible are trying to figure out how to explain to the American public that the precision defense systems they were promised cannot stop a weapon that turns one missile into hundreds in midair. They do not have a good answer. History never forgives the people who chose pride over peace when the price was paid by everyone else.